Hi, my name is Deroy, and this is Millennial Reasonings, special edition, conversations in which I explore the personal histories of millennials whom I know, who I find interesting, and who are making an impact. And in this week's episode, I speak with Davion Cooper, Vice President Corporate Controller at Dude Solutions. Welcome, Davion, and how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Good to see you. Good to catch up with you, Leroy.
Great, great. So I've known Davion for what, over 20 years now? We may look young, but I don't think we're that young.
I feel young. I feel young. How about
We
that?
feel young, exactly. So I've known him for quite a while now, but I find Davion interesting, not only because we're old friends, but because since moving to the United States for college and then launching out in the world, he has done and achieved so much. As one article by his alma mater put it, in less than a decade, he has put together an impressive series of career stops. So he started as an auditor at Ernst& Young, and then he moved into the tech industry, working with a fast-growing tech company, then on to a global e-commerce company, and now he's the vice president of a global software company. So that's quite impressive, quite a story. And so I want to talk to Davion a little today. So, Davion, my first question is, where are you from? Or if you prefer, where did you grow up?
Sunny Caribbean, Montego Bay, Jamaica. As I said, I'd begrudgingly living in the cold in North Carolina now, but yeah, grew up in Montego Bay, born and raised, and lived there until I left to what was that 2007 to go to Florida to go to university there. So, Jamaican true and true, and you know, second city of Montego Bay.
Yes, yes, the beautiful city of Montego Bay. And you left and you went to Florida. So at least your first stop in North America wasn't too cold. It was nice and warm in Florida for the most part. Kingston, I think 21, some people call it because so many Jamaicans live there. So that it must have been a sort of a gentler transition. But we'll talk about that a little more. But can you describe for me your childhood then or your early years? What was it like growing up in Mobile, as we call it?
Oh man, my childhood, I would say, in many ways was really quite a dichotomy, right? You know, depending on where you knew me from and what circles we ran in, you probably saw a different person, right? And I think in many ways that's sort of an interesting backdrop to my upbringing. You know, I was that kid in the neighborhood running around barefooted, right? Flying kites, playing sports, grew up playing soccer, cricket, you name it, just in the neighborhood, hanging out with friends and all that barefooted kid, with shirt off running around, right? And if you saw me in another circle, right, which I think we met at Cornwall College, in one ways you're in the books, your school's challenge quiz, you're all that stuff, right? And so, I think in many ways, I would describe my background and my childhood as a dichotomy. We had fun, right? It was a carefree life. You knew, with my parents, you had to be driven and working hard and striving and aspiring for things. But in many ways, it was sort of a leisurely, carefree life, really, right? And I remember just being in high school and primary school and just having friends from all different walks of life, right? And I think that shaped me in a lot of ways for experiences that were to come, right? But you know, I, I think about my life now and my life then, and the biggest difference I would say from the environment I live in is really how carefree, the Irie vibe, right? So when you hear Jamaican say Irie, right? We had struggles, right? We didn't come from money. I didn't come from money or family that was wealthy or anything like that. But you never felt poor, right? I never felt poor at all, right? And it's when you kind of look back at it and you go, well, I didn't have this, I didn't have that, right? But my family always did a great job of teaching you to be thankful and enjoying what you have and being grateful. And so
Mhm.
I look back at my childhood and growing up in Montego Bay fondly. Some really good memories there.
Yeah, I like that. The fact that, and it's a constant theme. I mean, when I talk to people, um, and I suppose other people's experiences might be different, but the carefree, or the fact that you may not have been wealthy or come from
Mhm.
money, but that wasn't an issue. That
Right.
was something that weighed on your experience or your consciousness. Your parents, you worked hard, they tried to give you the best. And even though you didn't have all that you needed, it was a good childhood, it was a healthy childhood, it was a productive childhood, and through the process turned out into a well-adjusted adult. So I
Uh,
think
so
that's the end becomes the work. So that's great. So skipping ahead a little, a little. So we've talked about your childhood a little. Um, what happened after high school? So, well, I know the story, but the question that I'm asking is, did you go to university? And we already talked about that. But when you went to university after high school, what did you study and why?
yeah, so that also was an interesting journey for me, right? If you remember, I had a couple of changes there. So it
Yeah.
might have been might have been around the ninth grade. If I remember, they had a career fair and they had this chartered accountant come in and he listened to him present. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be a chartered accountant, right? So ninth grade, that's what I was going to become. And then, that flipped where you go to what, 10th, 11th grade, and you had to choose sort of a track, right? And so I was going to go do sciences, right? So now I'm going to be a medical doctor, right?
Yeah.
Doing the sciences, bio, physics, chemistry, all that stuff. And you get to 11th grade, and it was sort of like, you know what? Forget about medicine. We're going to do law, right?
Yeah.
And so for sixth form, switched over all the arts and the humanities there, and that was the plan, right? I'm going to be a lawyer, right? And after I finished high school, and we made the decision that we are going to go to school in Florida at St. Leo University, it became, do I want to go study law in the United States, right? And I think what it came down to was just some of the different legal systems there, being in a Commonwealth country versus being in the U.S., right? And then sort of how those credentials sort of translate. My intent was I'm going back to Jamaica, right? And so I decided, you know what, let me choose a field that is going to be
Really?
fairly transferable, right?
That
Yeah,
was intent
yeah,
to
that was
come
the
back to
intent.
Jamaica?
That, that was the reason I didn't study law, right? So after I
Okay.
left, yeah, after I left Cornwall College, it was let me find a field that I thought was going to be readily transferable when I came back, right? So I said, you know what, um, went to St. Leo University and undeclared major, and then I switched majors to actually be a computer information systems major.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
I was doing computer programming and all that stuff, right? The business end of it, data systems, stuff like that. And because I was in that business field, I was, you're required to do some business courses, right?
Mhm.
So computer side of things, but you had to do some business courses, which is when I started doing. I took an accounting course, and interestingly, it actually met a Jamaican accounting professor,
Oh,
um, Dr.
really?
D. Yeah, right. Yeah. And him and I just hit it off, and I, you know, decided, you know what, maybe accounting it is, right? And so I switched over to accounting, and I am glad I did, and I have not looked back. So
That's amazing. It's like full circle. So
oh, absolutely,
grade 9
right.
CPA, then you didn't
Yeah.
want to become a CPA, chartered accountant, you wanted to become a medical doctor, and you said law. Then when you went to university, it
Mhm.
became it was accounting again. But that's to show, I suppose, the fact that you are multifaceted and you're able to switch between
You have
those specific areas of academics. So it was
mhm.
numbers, then it was science, and it was humanities, and you're able to manage all of that. Well, I know you're a brilliant guy, so that was okay.
Yeah,
That
no,
you made it work. You made it work, and that's a testament to your drive and your talent. But I wanted to pinpoint the fact that I've been talking about migration stories since becoming an immigrant myself. I'm now fascinated by migration stories and how people travel and how people move. And your migration story started out, you just went to school, and it wasn't intended to be a full migration story. You said
Right.
you intended to go back to Jamaica, which I find interesting because most times when Jamaicans touch in the land of milk and honey, as some people think it
Sure,
is in
right.
the United States, they are not coming, they're not turning back. But you said you were coming back, but then, as we know, you never did
There's
because
still
things
time, right? There's still time.
you still retired. Well, maybe in retirement, but there's so much
Yeah,
happening now, and you have a family and all of that. But that's intriguing.
yeah.
How life changes and brings the unexpected, but then it's how we deal with the unexpected, and you can change course. That's
Right.
the beauty of life and the beauty of living. So skipping ahead, so I know you went to St. Leo, but afterwards you did further studies. You did a master's in accounting, and then you started your career. And I mentioned some of the highlights of the career. But where do you live now,
Yeah.
and what do you do? And I'm very interested in what you do, because sometimes when accountants or other people explain what they do to me, I'm like, okay, I get it or I don't get it, but tell me
Right.
about that. Where do you live now and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina now. So moved up north from Florida up to North Carolina, and
Yeah.
it's actually been a really interesting journey because I started out sort of in core accounting, right? Actually did financial statement audits for one of the big four audit firms, EY, pretty global firm there. And so I started doing core public company audits. So I would go around and go through public companies records and just make sure there's no funny business going on there. And that was sort of a really good place for me to learn because you got to see different books of different companies, what people did, what they did well, what it didn't do well. And so you kind of amass this wealth of knowledge from all that, right? And so that's really where I started out right after my master's degree at NC State, and took that knowledge and then moved over to the public company side of things. So instead of auditing companies,
Mhm.
just being more in the finance and accounting function for a publicly traded company, right? And so it was everything from financial planning to accounting to month end close, just end to end accounting and finance, right? Which is cool, right? And cool but nerve wracking all the same because you end up on the side where you're the person signing off on a lot of reports that go to certain regulators and government entities and taking public stockholders. You got some fiduciary responsibility there, and so definitely a nerve wracking world to be in, but learned a ton in that world, and then moved on to over to Dude Solutions now, where it's also in finance, accounting and finance, but but different, right? I am a capitalist true and true now, which is really hard for me to say based on how I grew up. I never saw this part coming, but
Right.
I work for a private equity backed software company, and we're a global company, right? So I'm managing teams in Australia, India, UK, uh, Canada, multiple companies in the US. We buy companies, and so how I describe my role, the controller role. It's funny because my 7-year-old asked me, "So what does a controller do?"
Yeah.
And the way I describe it is picture an octopus and all these tentacles all over these places.
Right.
And just picture at all times, you've got to have each one of those busy with something else and knowing everything that happens in the business that could, whether it's money related or it could impact finances or it could impact dollars, you name it globally. In a given day, my job is to think about that, to make sure all the different pieces and every function are going well from a financial perspective, and that I'm safeguarding the financial viability and the financial progress of the business on a global scale, right? So that's been my role for here at this company and also in my couple of my prior companies there. So that's the most simplistic way I can describe the role.
Well, that's an
It is
excellent.
fun.
That was an excellent analogy with the octopus, and
Yeah.
you did a good job of breaking it down for the non-accountants and the financially disabled, or the people disabled in financial language. But that's excellent. there's a question that just came to mind, or it's not on an ordinary list, but when we were back in high school, we were doing history and literature. We had often had conversations about history and race and things
Yeah,
like that. So, what has been your experience as a black man in the United States and having risen to quite, the heights of your company? Um, I'm interested in what has been your experience there of having achieved professional success and
yeah,
living in the United States, living in the south of the United States.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
briefly tell me a little about that. That's something that I'm really interested in.
Right. Yeah, no, that is an excellent question, right? I think, in my field, I mentioned just in jest earlier that, hey, I'm a capitalist through and through now, right? That's my I live in the world of capitalism. And, I think in a lot of ways that's foreign for me, right? That's something that I've had to learn and adjust to. There's always the urge to try to fit in and to, survive in a world that you're not necessarily used to, right? And you find that in this world, you're not like anybody else around you, right?
Okay, yeah.
Nobody else around you is like you, right? And this is something that whether it was in college, in my master's program, right? It's not a field that you have a lot of minorities in. And then in audit world, and then as you moved up to finance, it gets lonelier and lonelier, right?
Mhm.
And I've had some really good experiences where I've worked with folks who, have taken personal interest in my development, right? There's a lot of personal responsibility that comes with seeking out those people, but also recognizing that not everybody is going to think that you belong there, right? And just being comfortable with that, right? And I think there are a couple of different ways to look at it. You go into those situations and I've had people, tell me, this person's only here because of affirmative action. I've had people say that, right? But
Excuse me?
right. Listen. I went to NC State, valedictorian of my undergrad, recruited, Ernst and Young Fellow, Accounting Student of the Year, School of Business Student of the Year. Got to the school, and the first day there was a young lady who was brazen enough to say, he's only here for affirmative action, right? And there, and it's not over in a lot of ways, but you realize also when you go in a room, everybody angles towards somebody else. So even when you're the most senior person there, and in that room,
Yeah.
the person who you're meeting for the first time, you kind of experience it over and over. They angle to somebody else because you can't possibly be the most senior
You
person.
can't be the VP
Right.
and you're angling
Exactly.
towards someone else, and then that that that,
Exactly.
that must make
Right.
you smile every
Right.
time that happens.
And what I've learned is there are a couple of ways to deal with it, right? You can either, make a big deal about it and, burn bridges and all that stuff. Or, what I've always had, Deroy, I've never been lacking in confidence. And I've always believed that every room I go in, I am smarter than the next person there, right?
Yeah, yeah. You've believed that for a long time.
Right? And I'll tell you what, that 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 sort of belief, right? I don't want to say cockiness, but that sort of belief has helped me to kind of,
Confidence in
yeah,
self. There's no
absolutely.
nothing
It,
wrong
it,
with
it has helped me to kind of brush some of the things off and say, okay, you know what? Maybe this person is not being malicious. Maybe this person's just, we all have our own, we bring to the table all our own biases,
that.
and experiences. And some of those are not intentional, right? And so I've taken the perspective of, this person will realize soon enough who I am, right? And come to that realization. But I think there are definitely days it is lonely, right? But I've always had the mindset that you're not a victim and that you have control over more things than you think you do.
Yeah.
And and I go into every day thinking today is going to be a good day, right? And so far it's worked out well for me.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, and I like the approach you take. And I think the approach you take has a lot to do with the fact that you grew up in Jamaica,
Yeah,
where you came from a place where black people are dominant. You came from the
right.
black majority country, and so that confidence has your
Yeah,
confidence was sky high. It was never impacted by the social and the cultural and historical situation that maybe some people in the minorities in the US experience, or Black people in the US or North America, because you didn't come with that. You came with, you are the best, you are the
Right.
brightest, and you can shine. So that's really fascinating. But I like the approach that, you give people the benefit of the doubt, and they will realize at the end of the
Mhm.
day that you're in charge.
Right. You know, I used to work for a CEO who would always he always led with assume good intent, assume good intent, assume good intent, right? And sometimes, it's hard,
Yeah,
right?
it's hard.
But
Sometimes good
sometimes it's
intent
hard.
isn't there, but yeah.
But yeah, but at the same time, I found that, assuming good intent and just recognizing that, listen, not everything somebody says is meant to be, disrespectful or derogatory. Sometimes they're just people have pre-existing ideas of how things work, not intended to be malicious. And you know, by by hanging around those people a little bit more, by exposing them to a little bit more of your knowledge, your culture, you can change some hearts and some minds, right? And so, I smile with people and win some hearts with a smile
Okay,
sometimes.
excellent. That's brilliant. I'm going to ask you one last question. We're going to wrap up, and it's kind of a double question, a double-barreled question. Um, what's one of the greatest challenges you have experienced in your journey so far, and or what is one of the greatest lessons you've learned in your journey so far? So,
Yeah,
depending on how you'd like to approach it.
I touched on a little bit of this earlier as far as greatest challenges, right? It's just recognizing that in many ways you're a fish out of water, right? When you leave the Caribbean or you leave Jamaica, you're going to a foreign world where you don't know anybody, you don't know anything, you don't, something as simple as going to the grocery store is a challenge, right? When you make that initial transition, right? And so you extrapolate that to your life and work and all that, right? You're in a world where there's no template and you're figuring it out all yourself, right? And I've had that challenge, and to this day I have that challenge because each level I progress is a brand new thing for me. You know, uh, Folks like me, I don't have somebody at that next level who goes, hey, here's what to expect, right? And so it's just been that constant challenge of each time learning what is expected, learning how to survive, learning how to navigate that. And so, in many ways, it's enjoyable, right? It keeps life exciting and fun, but really, there's that imposter syndrome sometimes, right? It's just learning and just always believing that you belong and knowing inside that you belong, right? So that challenge of just navigating these new worlds has been probably the biggest one. It does tie into the things that I've learned, right? And the greatest lessons I've learned has to do with people. People matter, right? And every time I've gotten stuck on something or had a challenge, overcoming it, as confident as I am, has never been just because of me, right? There are other people who helped, right? And sometimes from the places that you don't expect to get that help, right? And so it's just always remembering that people matter, right? And that people are willing to help and also reciprocating that, right? Whether it's through mentorship, right? I've made it sort of a personal goal of mine, those challenges I have with navigating these new experiences and new world and, the strange, lonely world sometimes of the corporate ladder, I've made it sort of my priority. Like if I can mentor somebody and introduce them to, hey, here's what's expected when you walk into a board meeting. Here's what's expected when you navigate these things, right? Those are the things that people doing that for me has helped me, and I've learned and I'm striving to impart some of that knowledge to other people, right? So people matter is probably the biggest lesson I've learned here.
That's great. I really that's a good takeaway. That's an excellent takeaway. Davion, it's been great chatting with you.
Yeah,
It's a short conversation, but full power packed with lots of takeaways, lots of gems. And so I really appreciate it again. Thanks for
absolutely.
chatting. Stay well, keep safe, and continue making an impact. This
All right, man. Respect.
respect. This has been Millennial Reasonings Special Edition. Thanks for watching.